She was stabbed 19 times by her 12-year-old best friends. All because they believed Slender Man was real. And 11 years later, one of them escaped. If you were online back in 2014, there's a good chance you remember hearing about the Slender Man stabbing. But what actually happened to 12-year-old Payton Leutner is even more disturbing than the headlines made it sound. Payton was best friends with Morgan Geyser. They'd been friends since 4th grade, and Morgan would later tell police that, for a long time, Payton was basically her only friend. Morgan had also become close with another girl, Anissa Weier. And Morgan and Anissa had something in common. They were both obsessed with creepy stories they had found online, particularly Slender Man. Slender Man was completely fictional, a tall, faceless character created on the internet as part of a horror story. That somewhere along the way, Morgan and Anissa stopped treating him like a fictional character. They genuinely believed he was real. They believed Slender Man could watch them. They believed he could hurt them or their families. And they became convinced that if they wanted to prove themselves to him, they needed to kill somebody. The person they eventually chose was Morgan's own best friend, Payton. And probably one of the most frightening parts of this case is that this wasn't something they suddenly decided to do that morning. Morgan and Anissa had apparently been talking about killing Payton for months. They discussed different ways they could do it, including killing her while she slept. Eventually, they decided Morgan's birthday sleepover would be their opportunity. On May 30th, 2014, Payton went to Morgan's home in Waukesha, Wisconsin. As far as Payton knew, she was just going to a normal sleepover with her 2 friends. She had absolutely no idea the 2 girls had been planning to kill her. The following morning, May 31st, the 3 girls went to a nearby park. At one point, Payton was told to lie on the ground and cover herself with sticks and leaves. She thought it was part of a game of hide and seek. Then Morgan attacked her with a knife. Payton was stabbed 19 times. She was stabbed in her arms, her legs, and her torso. And when it was over, Morgan and Anissa left her there. Payton was just 12 years old. She was critically injured, alone in the woods, and the 2 girls she trusted enough to call her friends had just tried to kill her. Somehow, Payton managed to get herself up. She used the trees around her to support herself, and slowly made her way out of the woods until she eventually reached the path close to a road. That's where a passing cyclist spotted her, and that moment almost certainly saved her life. When Morgan was later questioned by investigators, she said killing Payton had been necessary. She described Slender Man as a tall, faceless man who preyed on children and said she believed he was everywhere. She also said she was frightened about what would happen if they didn't carry out the plan. Morgan was later diagnosed with schizophrenia. Because of the girl's mental health circumstances, neither case ended like a typical adult murder case. Anissa was committed to a psychiatric institution for up to 25 years and was eventually conditionally released in 2021. Morgan received a much longer commitment, 40 years in a psychiatric institution. Meanwhile, Payton had to somehow rebuild her life. For years, she stayed largely out of the public eye. When she finally spoke publicly about the attack in 2019, she talked about learning to accept the scars covering her body as part of who she was. But understandably, some of the fear never completely disappeared. She revealed that she still slept with a pair of broken scissors beside her bed, just in case. Despite everything that happened to her, Payton went back to school. She took honors classes. She went to college, and she spoke about wanting a career where she could help other people. The little girl who had been left in those woods and wasn't expected to survive had grown up. But then, more than a decade after the attack, the case suddenly made headlines again. After years of treatment and several attempts to secure her release, Morgan was granted conditional release in 2025 and moved into a supervised group home. Then, on November 22, 2025, Morgan cut off her GPS monitoring bracelet and disappeared. Authorities began searching for her. By the following night, police had found her almost 200 miles away in Posen, Illinois, with an adult acquaintance. They were reportedly sleeping outside near a truck stop. And when officers tried to establish who Morgan was, she initially gave them a false name. She eventually reportedly told police that she didn't want to tell them who she was because she'd done something really bad, and suggested they Google her. Just imagine being Payton or somebody in her family and finding out that the person who tried to kill you as a child had disappeared from supervision. In December 2025, a Wisconsin judge revoked Morgan's conditional release and ordered her back into a state psychiatric hospital. Today, Payton is an adult. She's survived something that most of us couldn't even begin to imagine, gone to college and tried to build a normal life away from the crime that made her name known around the world. And I think that's the part of this case that sometimes gets forgotten. Everyone remembers Slender Man. They remember the creepy faceless figure. They remember the two 12-year-old girls who believed he was real. But the most important name in this entire story is Payton Leutner. Because Payton was 12 years old when two people she trusted betrayed her. She was stabbed 19 times. She was abandoned in the woods. And somehow, despite how badly injured she was, she found the strength to get herself up and keep moving until somebody found her. Slender Man wasn't real, but Payton's fight to survive absolutely was. And as a parent, this is one of those cases that makes you look at things like sleepovers completely differently. We spend so much time teaching our children to be careful around strangers, that the frightening reality is that the person who hurts a child isn't always a stranger. Sometimes, it's somebody they've trusted enough to call their best friend.